I don't need that, so I'm assuming y'all do?
No.
Now, that's gonna be for Bryce when he starts doing
Okay, well,
Let's
this.
just set it somewhere else.
Starts doing his drill. You're gonna need this, though.
Yeah, I guess I need that. We'll be right here sharing with, let's put it, I tell you, let's put it between him and I.
Y'all too?
Yeah, and they can share that one.
Don't y'all talk into it. Do it. That's what I got.
I'm learning that.
People on TV can hear you, these people can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh my.
In fact, you might want to post up down there, because you're gonna get on the computer at
Well,
I'll do my part, then I'll just sit back out of the way.
Okay. Hang out up here.
I love you, Ty. I thought it was pretty neat. Joe wore his OSU colors today.
Rusty, verify that's not OSU.
yeah.
It's close enough for this part of the country.
No. Not even close.
I'll have to. Friday's normally my OSU shirt, my orange, bright orange
Oh, yeah.
OSU shirt. So I decided to tone it down.
Tone it down a bit.
I figured.
What's fitting, you wore maroon. Of course, that's more Texas A&M.
My daughter wants to end up at OSU, so I figure I'll have plenty of OSU stuff.
For you.
And you know, and it really depends on what the major is, and then what the schools offer you. So
Well, what she wants to do is sports management.
that's
So
There's so many folks that have their undergrad from one and then their master's from the other.
I've got my undergrad and my master's from here.
She's been in her position.
You want to? Well, that'll be fine. I'll just bring the mic to you, and you can speak. That'll be just fine.
I heard my name. Don't be really. I didn't understand other people's stupidity. And let them know. Let them know. What are you doing?
Okay, it's time to get started. I'm going to call this special meeting of the Lawton City Council to order. Please stand for the invocation by Reverend Hampton and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you bow your heads, please. Father, we thank you for your goodness, your mercy. We thank you that you give us wisdom unabated when we ask. And we ask for that wisdom this morning as we go forward in this meeting. We ask that you cause the citizens in our town to prosper and to all be in good health. And we ask it in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Reverend Hampton, and please call the roll.
Hankins, Harris, Chapman, Burke, Hampton, Fortenbaugh, Johnson, Warren.
And a quorum's established. We have an addendum to today's agenda, and we're going to deal with those business items first. Business item number 1 on the addendum, consider approving the USS Oklahoma City Anchor Memorial to be located in Elmer Thomas Park in accordance with the attached rendering plans and location map with some exhibits. Okay, and we're getting those passed out. And Dwayne, are you speaking on this?
Yes, sir. Morning, Mayor and Council. This has been a long time coming. Several months ago, you were approached about a young man who was seeking to get his Eagle Scout badge, and he is, Mr. Aguilar had basically solicited the Navy to get a piece of the USS Oklahoma City, which was a nuclear submarine that's being decommissioned. At the time that he initially started the project, his plans were to try to obtain the submarine sail, which is rather large. It would have taken probably most of this room and 3 semi-trucks to get it here, but since it is the USS Oklahoma City, my understanding is the city of Oklahoma City is actually going to get that piece. But as all things continue to kind of go through the process, we were able to obtain the anchor and the section of the chain. Part of the obstacles that we had in front of us were we really didn't have a process to get that before the council in the proper manner. Our legal department identified an area that we needed to shore up, so we took a little time and developed a policy that sets out the criteria for how this is supposed to be done. It also, as part of the policy, identifies the size of the monuments that we would accept to be placed in the parks, and then ultimately gives the approval ability and discretion to the council whether or not to approve that. Our planning department worked very well with us in identifying that policy and setting that out. But one of the best things about that policy is that it actually identifies an area in Elmer Thomas Park around the east side of Lake Helen and then up around the north end as a dedicated area that we would use and basically call that Memorial Way or Memorial Lane. So I think that's going to be, in working with our Veterans Council, this is something that they had sought approval for us to kind of identify that area. If you'll remember when HAP Associates did the master plan, one of the things that we talked about was memorials and how those things should be displayed. And you don't want to combine areas of solitude and that kind of an area into your activities area. So we kind of provided that separation by utilizing that berm along the east side and then around on the north end. But today we have a gentleman, Mark Glenn, one of our citizens here in Lawton, has volunteered to travel to Washington State. He's not here today. He's actually loaded up and ready to go. He's going to make the 4,000-mile trip to go pick up this anchor for Mr. Aguilar. So we're excited about that. What we need is your approval of that memorial, and we'll get that letter signed and sent to the Navy Command.
Have a motion for approval?
Yes. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Hampton. Discussion or debate? Please vote.
Harris.
Yes.
Chapman. Hampton.
Yes.
Fortenbaugh. Johnson. Warren. Hankins.
Okay, obviously everybody's excited about that. I certainly am. And we didn't have any discussion, but I know it's an exciting thing for our park. Item number 2, consider approving the Gold Star Families Memorial to be located in Elmer Thomas Park in accordance with the attached rendering plans and location map with exhibits. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, this particular item, we actually have a couple ladies here in the audience with us today that'll remind you. Back in August of 2021, this actually came before Council, was approved through the the consent agenda, but again, due to some legal ramifications, it hadn't been through our City Planning Commission yet, and that's one of the criteria for locating a memorial in our parks that had to be met. So that has been done now as part of that policy I just discussed. I'm going to hand the mic off to Ms. Flores here. She's going to give you a little bit of background.
Thank you for our consideration to have our Gold Star Memorial Wall. It is very important. I'm going to cry, I'm sorry. It is very important for the city of Lawton, for the state of Oklahoma. There are so many families that have lost loved ones due to wars and conflicts. This has been a long time coming. We've been looking for it, working on it for a long time. It is a large wall that is going to represent us also, because one side is going to be etched with things that represent Oklahoma. The state of Oklahoma, a buffalo, something that represent Oklahoma in general. There are over 100 monuments throughout the United States and territories. There is none in the state of Oklahoma. This is something that I think Oklahoma could use, could appreciate. It would give our families a place to go and reflect. A lot of Gold Star families can't talk about it, don't want to talk about it. It's a private matter. But this is a place they could go to cry, to laugh, to do whatever, to try to get through this terrible, terrible time. I'm still struggling with it, and it's been 15 years. You will continue to struggle with it till it's your time to meet your children, your wife, your family. But I just want to thank you very much. We've been working very hard and very diligently, and I really, really, really am looking forward to the day that we can get this thing going. We're getting close to being able to do the groundbreaking. We're still continuing to do fundraisers, and I will do it as long as it takes. But I do appreciate your time and your efforts. Thank you.
And
Questions?
before I ask for a motion, I want to say God bless you
Oh, thank
and the
you.
price that your family
Thank
paid
you.
for our country, and the other ladies as well.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much for working on this very valuable monument. And to be here in Lawton Fort Sill is really special and really important. Can I have a motion for approval?
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Did you get, okay. Discussion or debate?
I
Mr.
just
Warren?
wanted to say that of all the monuments. I appreciate all of them, but this is probably one of the ones that I appreciate most, simply because there's been so many families in the Lawton-Fort Sill area that have lost loved ones. I have a vivid memory when I was in 4th grade of a soldier that was lost in Vietnam and his family at my school, that they gave them the flag from the school. So I think this is a great thing.
Thank you, Mr. Warren.
Yes, as a veteran myself, I think that anything that we can do to bring to the forefront of the sacrifices that veterans make, but the families make, sometimes even more of a sacrifice. My son went on, was deployed, and his little my granddaughter couldn't speak. She was very young, but I went to their house to visit, and I held her for about a half hour, and my shirt was kind of soaked, and you could tell that she was suffering, even though she couldn't speak, and I know families do that. So I think that this is something that needs to be brought to the forefront, and I, for one, appreciate you doing that.
Any other comments? Please vote.
Chapman? Yes. Hampton? Yes. Fortenbaugh? Yes. Johnson? Warren? Hankins? Harris?
And the motion carries. Thank you, ladies. Ken, that moves us to the business item on the regular agenda. Consider the fiscal year 2023 City of Lawton proposed operating and capital preliminary budgets, and to take appropriate action if necessary to include making amendments to the preliminary budget to be incorporated in the final budget that council considers. Michael.
Mayor, as we've worked through this budget process, we started it in a little different manner than we have in the past, where we just looked at the entire budget in one fell swoop. We divided the budget up into categorical areas and digestible chunks, so to speak, right? Well, we're at the point now we're going to talk about capital outlay, which is anything over $5,000 in value, trucks, things of that nature, and then we'll talk about capital improvement budget. It's taken a long time to get this capital improvement management program to the place where we can show you, and it's still not 100% correct. It's about 80–85%. Still a few things we want to work out, and what it turned out to be we thought would be complicated was even more complicated than we thought. I want to applaud Garver and our engineering team for working through this. It is a complicated beast, especially when you try to take a capital or put a capital management program into operation that you really didn't have at the very beginning. And the reason that's important is when we get to the capital improvement portion of the presentation is the different colored monies, so to speak, that go into that. For example, whether they're revenue supported, whether they're GO bonds, whether they're grant funds, whether they're capital sales tax supported, et cetera. There's a lot of different monies that go into these things, and oftentimes there are specific requirements for how some of those monies are spent, right? For example, if you take GO bond money, which is our ad valorem projects, you have to spend 5% of that money within the first 6 months, and then you have 3 years to spend 85% of that money. So it's important that we have a capital management program in place to manage those dollars. And that's just for that particular pot of money. When you get to federal or state grant money, there's requirements for that as well. So again, it's a complicated beast. It was infinitely more complicated than we thought, and it's taken longer than we thought. But we got about 85% solution, and I felt it was a solution that was far enough along that we could present this to the council to show you what it's going to look like and how it's going to work. And if you recall, then we'll have some qualification matrices that's pushed through to evaluate, give council an idea of which projects are being recommended, and that way they have that evaluation criteria. So we're going to start with that. We'll start on that first page, if you see there, or the City of Lawton, the revenue mix overview. This is, again, you've seen this slide a couple of times. Nothing's changed on that. You'll see that our taxes and charges for service represent about 68% of our revenue, and then other miscellaneous is about 19%, and it's broken out as the rest from there. That hasn't changed since our first couple of meetings. If you go to the next page, this hasn't changed either. These revenues are based upon the 7.5% projections. So this takes us to the next page. The council asked a couple of questions, and Joe Don went back and did a lot of work on this overnight. I think he's been burning the midnight oil, and which I greatly appreciate, trying to get these answers. One is, what is the required unrestricted fund balance drawdown under each rate scenario? So the council asked us to go back and look at what 7.5% would be, what 15% would be, and 10% and what 15% would be. So if you turn to the next page, we show those percentages. And to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music, the increased fees are all at 15%, so that's the fees set at increasing at 15%. And then Joe Don broke it out for the rates, i.e. the utility rates, at 7.5%, 10%, and 15%, and what that does for the fund balance that we were talking about. So if you look at the increase in fees at 15% and rates at 7.5%, we're still pulling our fund balance down by $7.837 million. If you look at 10%, it drops further to $6.629 million. And if you look at both rates and fees being increased at 15%, it puts us into the positive a little bit at $576,000. So I hope that's what the council wanted to see, to provide you the information that you needed to make those decisions. But I think the point that we were trying to get across, or you guys were trying to get us to answer, was what are those percentages and changes due to the fund balance? And this shows what those do for that. So do we have any questions on this slide before we move to the next slide?
I just wanted to say thank you, because I think that puts it in one picture what we had talked about and what there may have been some confusing thoughts about. Because, I think what we want to do is stay no worse off than flat. And if we can add a little bit into that fund balance, then that gives us something more for those times when we need an emergency. Funds, but I think this does put it all in one picture, where that 15% would go if that's the way the council ends up going, which is I think what I hope we do.
Mr. Manager.
Yes, sir.
On the next to the originally proposed rate, there's a column that says reduction in garbage rates.
Correct.
I don't recall talking about reducing.
That was the conversation that Councilwoman Johnson asked, was an original scenario. I believe it was on the first budget meeting. Councilwoman Johnson asked, what would that look like if we removed the increase in garbage rates? What would that look like?
Okay, all right.
So I'm sorry I didn't go over that one. That was the first kind of scenario if just the garbage rates were removed. Okay. If there are any further questions, we'll move to the next slide. This is, again, the slide that you've seen before. This talks about our expenditure mix. You can see that our personnel services, material supplies, other services and charges, capital outlay, and then debt service and miscellaneous charges are what makes up our expenditure mix. Again, these are the same similar slides. We talk about expenditure mix, where we have personnel, material supplies, other services and charges, capital outlay, or the purchase of rolling stock, capital improvement, which is funded out of the 2.125% of sales tax, debt investment, and miscellaneous expenses. Okay, that takes us to our FY23 budget presentation capital outlay. Capital outlay, again, is, for lack of a better word, rolling stock. That's the majority of what our expenditures are. And if you look at the capital outlay presentation here, capital outlay is not always just rolling stock. And we use those terms individually or interchangeably. Capital outlay can be capital improvement or equipment. In this case, this graph shows both. It shows the Propel at 40% of our capital outlay, meaning capital as a whole. General fund at 3%, enterprise at 3%. Emergency communication, there is some, but it's just not enough to register on the percentage scale. Reverb at 10%, that's our rolling stock. Ad valorem funds about 35%, and it goes around through the rest. As we closed out those former CIP funds, what was spent on those as they draw down. Any questions on the mix? Okay.
And that was actually the last slide in his presentation. Let's go into the discussion of the
Okay.
money and the discussion of.
Okay, so that's the last presentation, that slide. What we have now is we're going to go into presentation first, where Joe's going to talk about our capital improvement plan, or our capital management plan, which is what we hired Garver to put together for us, which is the plan on how we spend those capital improvement dollars. So Joe, if you'd like to go ahead.
Mayor and Council, we're going to briefly go over all the projects we're going to be talking about budgeting. These are projects that we've gone over with you before. Most of them you'll be familiar with. These are all the projects we had in the queue. So these are the projects we'll be funding for fiscal year 2023 and then projecting out in the future. Some of our capital improvement projects are Rusty's projects, since Rusty's spending most of our money.
I really debated calling this the Rusty Improvement Plan, because every time Rusty comes, he seems to grab the lion's share of money. It's not Rusty's fault. It's just public utilities takes a lion's share of the capital dollars. So if you want to name it, AKA Rusty Plan, kind of the the deal here.
Uh-oh.
We'll get back to it. There.
Is it running? Always technical difficulties.
Is it working, Joe?
Not yet. There we go. So Rusty's going to start with his project.
One of the primary projects that we have going on is the Phase 3 of the sewer rehab program. That is scheduled to continue up through the year 26. We have actually currently installed over almost 300,000 foot more than was identified through Phase 3, but we're still and many of those were failures of lines that were not projected, but we've had to go in and take care of those lines as we were going along, and we absorbed that through the funding of the Phase 3 funding. Currently, we have several projects in work. We're finishing up. The concrete will be poured on Gore this coming week, and that project at North Wolf Creek 2 will be complete at that time. That main will be complete, brand new, all the way from Cache Creek all the way to Quanah Parker at 82nd Street. That's new line all the way, trunk main. They will be moving to South Wolf Creek number 6, which is 67th to 82nd, to basically Goodyear Boulevard on that industrial line, and which we've got the pipe on site, we've got the bores in place, and then we have some sub-basin work, which is still in what place. Okay, alternate water source feasibility study. We have one production well that we have completed. It produces about 1.5 million gallons a day. We've run a pilot study on that well to determine what treatment process we're going to have to use to treat that water. And that's the treatment design and construction is part of the alternate water supply. We're looking at having 5 million gallons of production, which really looks like we will have to drill 3 more wells, produce 3 more wells. We've drilled some test holes in the last year and a half, 3 test holes that were dry. And really, it really relates to the fracturing of the rock and the porosity of the rock in that Arbuckle's Timbers aquifer. So we're still seeking out, we've got 2 sites we've already set up to drill, and then we're looking at some 7 or 8 additional sites to drill. We did receive an $8.4 million grant to help support that for resiliency. And you will see that when we get into our expenditures, how that funds are being used this coming year. The Oklahoma,
It's a state, when we applied for the DCIP grant, which is Defense Community Infrastructure Program grant, Richard reached out through the state, and Richard can explain it in more detail, but we reached out through the state for a support letter for that program, and they're like, hey, we got $8.4 million, and Richard appropriately said, we'll take it. Richard, you want to explain?
I worked very hard to get it, actually. No, it really, it's a military, it supports military communities. It's through the Department of Commerce, and it basically takes the economic engine that Fort Sill provides and takes some of the funding that the state would receive from that and gets it back to support that economic engine. Yeah.
okay. So that's where we're at on the alternate water supply source. Lake Ellsworth Spillway Rehabilitation, we received a FEMA grant to support the design and study of Lake Ellsworth Spillway that was damaged during the flooding related back to the 15 and 16 time period. The design is 100% complete on that project. We're seeking funding. We have submitted a couple of grant applications. The total construction for that project is $21 million. But we've got in place a grant application for that project that will fund about $16 million if we're able to secure that grant. The wastewater treatment plant, this is the interim project. This is the basically $5 million project we have underway right now. The project is moving on. We're finally getting equipment starting to deliver. The project should have been finished but delivery times have, what was 3 years ago, you could get them in 90 days. It's taking 8 to 10 months now at this time. So this project's still on budget and on schedule, but it's funded through a state revolving fund loan.
So Rusty, before you move forward, can you go back to the picture of the pipe?
The pipe.
It was where you bed the pipe.
Wrong way.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I wanted to take a minute to go back to this picture to talk about, when we talk about materials and supplies, we can't complete projects like this without rock or the proper bedding material. And when we talked, the past couple of budget meetings, we talked about the increase in materials and supplies. We wouldn't be able to do this if we can't get our rock haulers to bring us the bedding material. It's critically important when you install pipe like this that you bed it properly, because in the future, whatever crews go out to repair this, they know that they're close to that pipe when they reach that different color strata right there. So they stop digging as aggressively as they would before, and they know that they're really close to that pipe. So it's important that we have that there. And when Rusty and them install that pipe, they also put the location material in there with it, so they know where the pipe is, not are. English is not my first language, apparently. So I think that's important. And Rusty, can you go back to the slide you were at?
Okay.
So when Rusty talked about the lead time is also one of those things that has cost us more in dollars to expend to get those products here, because now it's a much longer lead time, shipping costs have increased, the cost to produce is increased. When Rusty talks about a pump motor that goes into a lift station, for example, for a sewer lift station, we're talking, what were they, 50,000 before? How much are they now?
We had one at the wastewater treatment plant was 50,000 prior to the COVID time period. Now it's $150,000.
So we don't say that just for the shock factor of it. We get asked quite frequently, why do these things cost so much? Well, inflation is in the supply constraint, and the world that we've dealt with for the pandemic, and then people coming back to work, and all that's in play, from a $50,000 to $150,000 for a pump motor. That's critically important that we fund it properly so we can continue to maintain our assets. Rusty, go ahead.
Okay, Michael, on that picture of the pipe right there, that pipe 1 year ago was $65 a foot. Today, that pipe sells for $150 a foot. That is the cost escalation in the last 12 months we have seen. The Phase 1 improvement project for the wastewater treatment plant, we have done our 60% design review. Our current cost estimate on that project is $61 million. 18 months ago, that estimate was right around $40 million. That's an increase in escalation in costs that we're seeing on this one project of about, and somewhere in excess of $20 million. This one is, we had one loan that we prepared for that original construction cost. We are going to bring to you next week is a second loan for OWRF, Clean Water State Revolving Fund, to fund the additional with some contingency money in it to help fund the Phase 1 project. It is scheduled to start advertising the end of July, 1st of August. Okay, we've got two projects identified here. Granular activated carbon, that is the filtering media for the water treatment plants. We have replaced 5 filters media. We're still needing to replace 6. That is a cost estimate of $600,000. We had locked this cost in prior, and so we've locked the price in so we can actually still accomplish this at replacing, and that will have all the filter media at both water treatment plants replaced with the granular activated carbon this coming year. That is going to be funded out of the 19 Propel half-cent water and wastewater funds.
So if the council recalls, when the mayor and the city went forward with the Propel CIP, 0.5% of the 2.25 was set aside for public safety sales tax. $250,000 would be placed into the city's emergency fund, the true emergency fund, which is restricted by code for what it can be spent on. And then the remainder of it is for infrastructure repairs, utility infrastructure repairs, which that's what Rusty is referring to, is that will come out of that 0.5 cent.
The second slide here is the Scada improvement project. This is for, have done 100% design review. We are starting to advertise this project next Wednesday. Council approved the plans and specs last council meeting. Right now, the estimate is going to be, construction is going to be from $3.5 to $4 million. These funds were identified in the 2019 Propel, and it's going to be financed through Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, so that it's not hitting all of the 23 CIP funds at one time. And that's coming to council next Tuesday to finance that project. The Scada system is the control operations of our entire water system, water treatment plants, and distribution system. So we can actually, from our office or with our city computer, our remote desktop, we can actually log in and see what's going on that system at any time, 24 hours a day, and actually control it. Some people will have the authority to control it. Some people will just be able to look at it.
It's wastewater as well, right?
This is just going to be the water project. The wastewater project will incorporate the Scada system for the wastewater.
So I asked that question for a purpose. Mr. Hampton, you had asked, I believe, last council meeting, how does our technology improvements help us? Well, in our wastewater treatment plant, as it aged, it required more physical bodies to maintain it. And it's really the same for the water treatment plant. These supervisor control and data acquisition systems or activation systems allow us to remotely operate some of these systems and to monitor them. So what we've been able to do as we've made these changes and projections in the future to absorb or reduce some of those personnel costs so we can fund other things in the city, this is one of those things that will help us do that.
And with the SCADA system on the water plants and the distribution system is we get an alarm. The water plants do have operators on duty 24 hours a day, but by having this system where they can look at it and correct activity at those facilities remotely, we will not have to be paying the overtime to bring people into the plant to get there to see what it takes and then taking care of it. They can remote in and take it. So it's going to reduce overtime expenditures on the water and operations. On the wastewater side, it will allow us to also reduce staffing because you're controlling it through a computer system. And so you will have staffing reductions when that system is complete operational. Okay, Casserole Waterline project. This project estimated a year ago at about $13-14 million. Right now, the current estimate is $25 million. But we're gaining a benefit from this right here is we're gaining, in this photograph, you see a pedestrian pathway across Wolf Creek right there between, right there at Complete Eye Cares on one side and a restaurant on the other side. It gives you a pedestrian pathway across that channel there, and what it does, it's cheaper to put the waterline aerial across that channel, and it provides the superstructure for the bridge. And actually, it's cheaper building the bridge pedestrian pathway across that than it is boring and tunneling under that channel and doing all the work. So we actually get that benefit there and save money. So we're getting that pedestrian bridge across that. And this is a rendering of that pedestrian bridge.
Rusty presented this idea of, the first, I guess, the design concept was it would be underground. And Rusty came and he said, Michael, I think we need to make this overhead. We can accomplish a couple of things, right, which is be able to provide a pedestrian access or way there, and at the same time we can hang those pipes underneath it. And I thought it was a great idea. So I applaud Rusty for thinking ahead like that, because that's really what we need is staff that thinks, how can we make this the best for our citizens and accomplish our infrastructure needs. And this is a primary example.
Absolutely, that's great.
Okay, water meter replacement project. This is a project that pays money back. And when meters become inaccurate, they start reading low. And your water loss and your revenue loss goes down. And we have approximately 32,000 meters in Lawton that were installed 13 years ago. They are reaching life. And this is a phase one project of replacing from 8,000 to 10,000 automated meters throughout Lawton, and estimated cost of $5 million, where we have arranged the staffing, since meter services has now moved to public utilities, and we have coordinated with them and determined how many man hours they would have available to replace meters. And over about a 12 to 14 month period, we believe that staff can actually do those meter replacements with no additional labor cost, but and this will fund the actual cost of 8,000 to 10,000 meter and radio systems.
I think one of the things Rusty said was pretty, I don't know if you caught it, right? But he said meter services has moved to public utilities. That was a recommendation of the Novak report. And we actually finished that recommendation, or we concluded that and moved them over to public utilities. They work hand in hand with our water distribution team, so I think that's a critical item to discuss, is that going forward. Rusty mentioned also that as meters age, even ultrasonic meters as they age, they never read fast. The American Water Wastewater Association has a testing criteria for when a meter leaves that it has to meet, and it's within, 2 or 3%. It's never over 100%. It's within 2 to 3% of 100% as it leaves the factory on accuracy. So it never reads more. I've never, in all the years that I've done this, and Rusty has done it longer, I've never seen a meter read more than it should. It always reads slower than it should. And when you're talking about making sure that we're capturing the revenue that we need to capture, right, and accurately bill the customer, that's how it's done. Did I get that right, Rusty?
That's correct. That's correct. This is a layout of a 7-year capital plan for all of public utilities, where the funding source is, and the impact on each year's of the capital improvements program. And what we have in the top is the Casserole water line. The cost there, if we'd have put all these projects into the, and not looked at financing those, it would have taken all the CIP money for almost 3 years and maybe 4 years, every penny of the CIP. But by financing them, and all you have to program in is paying the debt service, the loan payments on it, it actually lets you move the cost out and spread it out so that it leaves room for other projects to occur.
And all of this will be wrapped up and shown in our capital management program. We just have the Rusty Show to start us off.
And here, as you can see in FY23, the impact on the drawdown on the half-cent water and sewer is $970,000. Alternate water supply was scheduled for $8 million, but because of that $8.4 million grant, we will be able to fund this year out of that grant funds 100%, so it will not have an impact on the CIP available funding. Sewer rehab, we had already previously obtained a $12.2 million loan, which the funds have been received. We're going to fund this year out of that loan payments that we already have, so it will not have a footprint on the FY23 CIP. Wastewater treatment plant is going to be funded through CWSRF loans, and this is the actual drawdown of the loan. It's not the impact on these are funded and supported by the enterprise funds, not by CIP, but it's still a capital project. And the last one down there is the Scada System. And that $4 million, this was a specific line item. The IT improvements had $8 million for IT and $4 million for Scada. That is part of that, is spreading that out instead of impacting the CIP. Basically, what it does is it frees up money by spreading it over time to allow other projects to proceed.
So I'd like to jump back just a little bit, not jump back in slides, but jump up to the top where we talk about alternative water supply. We have submitted for the past 2 years Defense Community Infrastructure Program grant. We have not been successful in obtaining those. The first year, DCIP awarded quality of life grants. Second year, they ordered infrastructure, and we submitted quality of life the second year. This year, we're going to submit both, which will be help with the youth sports complex, and it'll also infrastructure. So we'll submit both applications on behalf of the city, and we're going to ask for a matching of the state funds at about 8.4 million in that regard. So fingers crossed, we'll get a DCIP grant, which will help us with this process. And I think one of the things that Rusty said, and how we've gone through this and how we want to structure our capital management project going forward is they took the time, staff took the time to look at our cash flow. And Mayor, you and I have talked about this before, about whether we borrow the money and how we do that and how it cash flows across the years. This starts to show you how it cash flows across. On that first year on the Casserole Waterline project, if I see that correctly, it's $250,000. That's to do some design work, I'm assuming, or maybe some right-of-way acquisition, because we don't need all of that construction money that first year. If we put it all in that first year, then what Rusty said would be absolutely true. We wouldn't have any other money to do any other capital project. So it's important that we look at that, and when those projects will be done, designed, so we've talked about in the past, 12 to 18 months to do those things, we'll budget for those items, and then 12 to 18 months later in the budget, we'll budget for the actual construction. And we may, budget it over multiple years, depending on how big the project is. So I think it's important that we point that out.
The Casserole Road water line, we design the construction. We will be bidding that project in November of this coming November. Would go to construction in January. We would have to, if we were not financing that project, we would have to encumber $25 million for that construction, which would take the entire available funds for FY23 that's available in the CIP. Either so by funding it through state revolving funds, it actually spreads that out and allows, and basically the only impact to this coming years is $250,000. So and that's the same through several of those projects.
Maximizing the available amount of funding possible.
Michael,
Sir,
what is the enterprise fund?
The enterprise fund are our utility funds, water, sewer, and trash.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I had a question. Rusty, these projects that we're talking about here, they're actually expanded over more than 1 year, right?
Well, these projects right here are scheduled for construction in '23.
So these will all be completed in 23?
They take more than 1 year to build, like the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 project. We will advertise that, start construction in the fall. That project is 26 months long, but we have to encumber all the money when we award that contract, $60 million, if that's what the bids are.
Right.
We have to encumber, but we can encumber against a loan the same as we can encumber against cash money.
Yeah.
Okay.
State law is pretty specific when we speak about awarding a contract, that we have to have the funding available for that contract. That's the reason we use like the Water Authority or one of our other trust authorities, so we can span multiple years.
Right.
The city can't do that.
Right.
A city proper can't do that.
Right. Well, for the sake of the constituents that are listening, I think that it's important for them to understand that these projects are funded this year, but necessarily won't be completed because they probably...
They will start construction, but they will not be, they take longer than 12 months to construct.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
The total of all of the public utilities construction that will be underway at this time next year will be in excess of $120 million under construction.
So you see poor Larry? You see poor Larry over there? I just want you to point out, Larry's over there with his head hung low because Rusty's up here, you know. I tell Rusty, don't come talk to me, because every time you come talk to me, it's like $50,000 for something, right? Yeah, 50 million. But they've done a great job. Next slide.
And then now it moves to Joe. Okay.
I'd like to point out that the Cash Road Waterline project is an example of where our projects overlap. So we have a sidewalk project that was on Cash, and part of that pedestrian bridge that we were putting sidewalks up and down. So they're going to build the sidewalks as part of that deal. And then Rusty came up with the great idea of doing the aerial crossing to get our bridge, which we need to get a pedestrian bridge across Wolf Creek also. So a lot of these projects overlap. A lot of our roadway projects, we're putting in water lines too. So we're multitasking wherever we can. The projects that we'll be looking at funding in 2023, I'll go through them pretty quick. A lot of these you've seen is Gore Boulevard, 67th to 82nd Street. We're currently putting in the water line and sewer line relocations and doing all the other utility relocations. We are running a little bit of delay with AT&T. They have some really major cable stuff out there that's going to take a little while to get relocated, but once we get everything relocated, then we can start the roadway part of the project, which ODOT will be participating in, and I think there's 75-25 on that one. Sure. That was for the water line. Yeah, for the water line relocation, not the roadway itself.
Thank you.
Lawrence Street drainage improvements, this was an issue that was left over when we put in Lawrence Street. The consultant didn't design adequate enough drainage for that project. We had to go back in and add some more stormwater. This project is almost complete, and the property at B and Lawrence is draining now in front of their business. It's not backing up water anymore.
Yeah, apparently I owe Joe a steak dinner for working through our questions that we had related to Dewberry. We'll get to that when he brings it to the council, but I got to buy a steak now for Joe. So he did a good job is what I'm saying. Got
to have motivation sometimes, right? This is another example. This is the Pedestrian Bridge. It's been around a little while over I-44. It was funded a little differently with ODOT, where they do the hiring and everything, and we basically give them the money, but we still participate in some management of it. Material costs have just skyrocketed. Our share of this project at one point was $600,000. Currently, at the new construction cost, our share would be $1.4 million. The good news is just yesterday I found out that ODOT is willing to give us some more money, which will lower will still be more than $600,000, but it's going to lower that 1.4. We're negotiating that right now. Rehab, Lee Boulevard from Goodyear to I-44 and Goodyear from Lee to Cache. This is the project we've been working on for a little while. As you know, we've started the mill and overlay project. We opened bids. We've awarded that contract to T&G. We are waiting for a notice to proceed from the federal government to start that project. They have to give us an official notice to proceed to start work. That's the phase one. Part of the 2023 budget is phase two. We'll have before you and shortly a design contract to start the design on Goodyear from Lee to Cache. And part of this budgeting process is we determined our cash flow and how we're going to fund things and our schedule on when we do things so we can fund these projects and get them started. City Hall renovation, we're well within it. The project, the first project you'll see started with it is the parking lot. That'll be the first thing we do. We got to get the parking lot installed so we can kind of use other areas of the City Hall property to stage work, and everybody will move to start parking in the new parking lot. We'll also be putting in a new kind of utility drive-through where you can pay your utility bills. What we're going to show you later is the Propel Programming Planning Project, which has allowed us to put together all this budgeting information, which is, like Michael said, has been more complicated than I think any of us really appreciated when we got into it. And the project, Larry and his folks are real excited about, and us too, is our pavement assessment project, which is going to assess all of our pavement in town and give us some scoring. That's underway. A project you'll see started in 2023 is the US 62 Interchange. We will bring before you a design contract to start the design so we can start design and get into purchasing our easements for this project. And like a lot of projects, this one in particular is going to be, multi-year. It's going to take quite a while to get through design and construction on this project. Big project. Not in Rusty's standard big project, but the citywide sidewalk project, which we just had a groundbreaking ceremony on. We'll have a report for you at the next council meeting about engineering what we think, how we ought to attack all the different sidewalks, but it'll be an ongoing project. We have an on-call contract with a company for $1 million a year just to keep constructing sidewalk as we can. McMahon Auditorium, we have a remodeling project for it. Both the construction manager at risk and the construction manager at risk contracts for this and City Hall will be on your next council agenda. So these are our surprise projects that always happen that you got to be prepared for and somehow do. These are the bridges I told you about on 11th Street that were having substantial failure and they need to be replaced. Also the bridges on Cache Road where Rusty's putting in the pedestrian bridge, they need some repair work. And We had to put a load rating on those bridges because of their deterioration because of maintenance. But we can get that fixed and hopefully get that load rating raised up, because right now there's some fire trucks can't cross that bridge.
Surprise.
Right. So then this last couple of slides here, which I think you have a handout, is all these projects and our projected budgets as we're going out in the years. But I thought it would be helpful also to show you a time frame, and these are in calendar years. So when you're talking to your constituents and stuff, you can see blue is when the design kind of starts and overlaps, and then the red is construction. And these are kind of our projected start and stop dates. With that, these are all the projects that these were already in the queue. So all these projects have taken up most of all of our budget for 2023 and starting our projection on out. And that's what we'd like to show you next, is our CIP planning portal and how all this money works together and how we're able to recommend we budget all these projects going into the future. Bryce, you're up. Can you, yeah, we need to trade spots. He needs to, Drawdown, can you?
So, 3 years ago, approximately upon me taking the position of city manager, we looked at how do we handle capital projects in the city, and identified that we needed a way to evaluate and rack and stack, so to speak, all our capital projects, and then present those to the council with recommendations, so the council has an informed decision-making process on which projects would be funded and which projects would not. Because let's face it, there are many more projects than we have the available funding for. But this system was created to help that decision-making process. Now, this portal's about 85% complete. We still got a few things we got to work on. Did we solve the ranking issue, the numerical ranking score issue? Is that still? Okay. So if you'll see on here, when we get to it, it'll show some ranking scoring. It's not quite flushed out all the way, but the point of it is to show how they went through the system, how they ranked, and how we would present those in the future years. Now, as Joe pointed out and Rusty pointed out, we have already had stuff for 23 already planned out from previous years, but as we move forward, we will start to show those to the council, those projects. We'll do the same type process next year in the budgeting process, but it will be more fluid, meaning those projects haven't been all approved or all vetted. So, Bryce, why don't you go ahead and show us the portal and walk us through it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you. So, this is going to be what will become the public-facing budgetary dashboard here. So this is where we have future projects that aren't necessarily under construction, but the citizenry can come out and see, hey, you know, is this, what projects are happening in my location? They can click on it and find a specific part of a project and get some details on that. They can also click on these main projects over here and get the fiscal year outlay of budgetary information and just a few other details about them.
So, Bryce, let me jump in here real quick. I think what was a critical component of this is we've put in about 40 projects. Initially, I'd asked Mary to do 400, but the budget just didn't support putting 400 projects in there, and I think that's a big number. How can we have 400 projects? Well, we absolutely have more than 400 projects, but for Garver, we set their threshold at 40 projects. So Garver helped our staff input 40 projects into this portal so we understand how the process works, how the system works, and in the future we will be putting those in, and we'll go over some of the evaluation criteria that we use, or the rip and run sheets that describe the project that will help council make those decisions.
Yep. And this also shows you can filter by a project type, a fiscal year if you're looking for a specific budgetary year, and then also funding source, which we have most of all the funding sources we were just described ad valorem. There's some grant money in here, but this is pretty accurate to, you know, again at that 80-85% level of what you're going to be looking at on a specific budgetary year. And this feeds from the internal information that your city leadership and staff will be putting into the system. So it's live updating. So as you make corrections or there's changes that are made, the public will have that information as well. So this will be this is kind of just the public interface. It's pretty simple to use. There's not a lot of filtering. We have down here, this is amount of budget for each fiscal year from different funding sources. So you can see we've got, quite a bit of Propel money budgeted as far as projects budgeted on that year, and out to FY26 currently.
If I may too.
Go ahead.
One of the major purposes that we wanted to accomplish. One of the main initiatives that was important to council and the city manager and mayor was to be able to communicate the status of all these projects. And so particularly as it pertained to Propel, and there's a lot of different categories of projects that were voted on by the people. So you can see those broken out, and they can click on each one of those to see where are we within that project, what's the status of that project, and when will I expect a certain project to maybe occur. So the main idea here is to communicate with the public the intentions of the city and the progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I wanted to show you just the internal dashboard as well, where their staff will actually be updating this information. And this is something that is, let me zoom out here a little bit so you can see the full thing. This is something that is exclusively for city staff to look at. I've already filtered this to FY23 through 26. You can see here's all your different funding sources that you have budgets for, and here's all the projects that we're planning on doing over the years. So we've got 126 million budget, 137 million actually projected to actually do in projects over the next 4 years, and that's excluding some of these Rusty's SRF projects where he's doing these huge capital outlays up front. This is just the payments on those loans and other projects that we're not funding like that. So yeah.
Might note that the negative number is telling us, and when we get into each year, is telling us that these are projects why we need to look at bonds or loans to pay for these projects, because cash alone won't fund all the projects. So don't be alarmed by the negative number.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something I wanted to go back to. So just by changing some filters here, we can go and look at our next year's budget, and this is all funds, but we can look at just Propel. And we're doing good. We've got money to do it. And we think, hey, there's some extra money there. But then we go and we look at also FY24, and we've got a negative number. So this money that we have maybe in excess this year, we're actually using and have a need for the following funding year, and then some. So like Joe was mentioning, we'll need to do some sort of funding or move projects around to do that. So again, this is kind of a preliminary budget to give to you guys to look at, but we'll be looking at solutions on how to do lending or moving projects around to meet these budgetary demands. But I think we're in a really, really good spot here with it.
Yeah, can I ask a question? You said this was a staff portal?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is the council going to have access to the staff portal also? Or?
We can do that. This is through a GIS login. The reason for that is this has forms that enter in, so you have to have licensure with the software to get into it.
Right.
I'm sure that's something that can be arranged. We can also update if there's any specific feature of this that you're wanting to see on that public-facing dashboard, because that doesn't require any sort of licensure to access. We can also get those changes and updates if graphically or anything like that out to that dashboard as well.
As you can see, this is an extremely complicated process, because when you start talking about whether it's Propel dollars or ad valorem dollars or grant dollars, and as we said before, every one of those have spending requirements or criteria related to them. We get GO bonds, right, which are ad valorem tax dollars to do streets. We have to spend a certain amount of those monies at a certain time rate, and we have to burn that money at a burn rate of 85% by 3 years. So I'm not burning it physically, it's just how you spend it. You have to be down to there. So it's important as we go work through this process to have a tool to help us and help the council plan on how those dollars are cash flowed. It'll also help our finance department and our capital improvement manager and our finance director help the council and help me manage or massage that cash flow through the years, because it's going to take work. Instead of we think we have this available, we think we have that available, we'll now know what we have available and how we can fund it. I think an important part of this is, for example, if we don't do anything, as he has it filtered right there, we're negative $13 million. We have to figure out how to handle that, right? As Rusty has shown in his analysis, if we borrow the money, Mayor, and we pay those payments, we are able to stretch those dollars out over a longer period, right? We also know that we don't need to pay for the entire project at some points in this budgeting year, because we're doing design and right-of-way analysis, right-of-way acquisition. So that pushes that money availability for that year to other projects, and we stretch it out over the years. So we talked about multi-year budgeting. This is one step closer to that. This is multi-year capital budgeting, which gets us one step closer to that total overall multi-year budgeting. And when we get through our system and we get fully employed with Tyler, we should be able to do multi-year budgeting as a whole. So you'll start to see, what does that do to our reserve fund when we start talking about that if we don't do this, and we'll see those analysis. So it's taken a lot of work to get here, is my point. It's taken about a year to get to this point. And we pulled our hair out in some places and just tried to figure this out. But it gets complicated. And I know if it's complicated for the people that do this, it's going to be complicated to understand. But we're trying to make it as simplified as possible and at least have information of when the project starts, when we expect for it to start construction, and then what we're funding in that year. I think that's important.
I'd like to point out that this sheet that you have from the previous presentation, in the pink column, the fiscal year 24, those dollar amounts in there are construction costs. And those are the items that are going into the negative, and that's why we'll need to finance those large construction costs, which is what Rusty did for his projects on his large cost with the state revolving fund.
So how do you deal with expected state contributions on that very top line on Gore Boulevard? We're expecting them to pay 80% of construction, but you don't deal with that in your spreadsheet. How's that dealt with in the program?
Well, with those, ODOT pays us as we go along, so we just show our share of that project is what's in here.
So our share is is a total of 7.7 million?
It is.
Of 1 mile?
Yeah. That's because material costs are just skyrocketed on everything.
I think Mayor
speechless.
Said 1 mile. It's not for $7.5 million for 1 mile.
It's from 67th to 82nd.
1 mile, okay.
The total cost of the project is what?
I don't have that number right here. I apologize.
Well, it says 7.7.
On the, let me see the first one here.
Is that the total city cost?
We'll get the answer, Mayor.
We'll get that for you.
I'm on this spreadsheet right here.
Right, I understand. That may be a typo. That may be the total cost of the project. Where am I?
I think that's our total contribution cost for that project. Yeah.
Nope, we passed
20%. We'll verify that number. As we said, this is a work in progress. But we'll verify that number for you, Mayor.
Thank you. And the same question would be true
7.5.
on the Lee Boulevard project, where we're expecting $2 million of federal funds.
Well, the total roadway cost is, Shivani was just pointing out, she's our project manager for this project, is $10 million roughly, and the water line is $2 million, so that's $12 million. So that is that 5-point-something million is our share, and the remaining amount is what ODOT's paying. So the total project is a $12 million project.
State pays us 75% of the construction of the road only.
Correct.
Okay,
We had to pay for all the utility relocation.
Okay, and the main thing is all of that is figured into this program so we can go see it and not be thinking we're paying out money that we're going to get reimbursed from a federal grant or a state grant?
No, if we got to pay out the cash, we include it, but these where we don't, we're not going to be out that expense. It's not included.
I think that's one of the great things about this and why I've looked forward to it so much is that once everything is loaded into it and we have some glorious day when the state of Oklahoma or the federal government says, hey, we'll try to help y'all out and we'll give y'all the ability to borrow money at 1%. We can go in and grab projects and move them and say, okay, we're going to do these right now because we're going to save money in the long run by doing that. And the great thing about it is it moves everything. It doesn't just move that project. When staff has to do it now, they got to go brew a pot of coffee and sit down and say, okay, what's the ramifications of that across the whole board? And then when they drag it on this program, it's just going to change everything at one time.
And Mayor, you asked a question, and it's not Oklahoma specific. It's pretty much a standard. Utility relocation costs are usually borne upon the city. So it's not just Oklahoma.
I just want to say that us moving forward, I want to thank you, City Manager, and everybody that's involved in that. You know, transparency to the citizens is important, and part of transparency, of course, is accountability. And you can't have accountability until you kind of want to look at yourself and what you're doing. So,
this is
I think that moving forward, this is really, really good for the citizens.
This has been a very large octopus to wrangle down. It's got a lot of tentacles to it, and I want to applaud staff for working through it. We have a small engineering staff. They've worked with Garver, who has put a lion's share of work into this. Matter of fact, they did all the work except for the consulting and the input from our staff. So they've done the work. We just got to refine it and get it to the point where we can understand how it works and present that refined or finished version to the council. It's a difficult process, as I said in the past, because we're starting from a place where we've never been before. You know, so we've started something that's never been done here on how to look at multi-year capital budgeting and multi-year budgeting for that matter. So when you start from something you've never had and you try to create this and work it forward, it's difficult. There's a component to this on the other side of it, which is in the financial system, which Drawdown and his team will have to now plug into our capital management module in our financial system so we can track those dollars and they can talk back and forth. Now what they're worried about is what's the project cost. What Joe and staff need to know is Drawdown says we got $25 million in Propel CIP money, for example, if that's the number. That's what we have to work with. That's what he's estimating in the tax collections for that particular funding source, and that's what we go back and look at, and then we figure the rest of them in. But it's not just Propel that we're looking at. We're also looking at what we get in our GO bonds for ad valorem. We're also looking at, will we have any grant funds that come in, and will that supplant or move some of those other funds, Mayor, like you talked about? You know, are there any other funding sources out there? Are they revenue supported, right? Meaning we can borrow the money and spread those costs out. So it is very complicated to do, but we've tried to make it as simple as possible so that our council, our staff, and our citizens understand what's going on in the city.
Yeah, so that citizen part of that portal, when people are going in to set up their water bill, they go into that first Tyler screen, and then they go into paying the water bill from there.
Correct.
That citizen portal will have this information for the citizens in that front portal.
This portal will not be the utility billing portal. This is only for capital projects.
Yeah, but the initial Tyler page that you first hit, is that where the citizen portal is going to go?
No, sir. This will be a standalone entry for it alone.
Yeah, I'm getting at where the citizens, because the citizens are going to be able to go and look at that citizen.
There'll be a portal on our webpage that they'll go and access, and that's where they'll be able to see the capital. We'll name it Capital Management Portal, or the City of Lawton's Capital Management Portal. Whatever.
Wonderful.
You guys come up with a great name, we'll name it that, and it'll be on our webpage. So
no, that's wonderful.
Separate.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I just want to mention one thing, and I actually learned this from the mayor, so I hope I get it out right. We should not hesitate to borrow money. These projects are very important. We shouldn't hesitate to borrow money, and you can see why, especially now with the inflation going on. We can borrow money at a ridiculously low interest rate, 1%, 2%. In a year, the cost of the project can go up 15% like it's doing right now. So we basically got free money out of the deal.
Mayor, did I get this saying right? True cost of money is inflation over time. So, yes, we're extremely cognizant of that. And then, as Rusty pointed out in his presentation for his portion of it, which I think we might call it the Rusty plan. But nonetheless, as he pointed out, it's critical that we program those dollars. If we can borrow those monies through SFRF, and they're in the 1.5%, 2%, 2.5% range, I think we are, yes, and inflation's running at where it's at, yes, we need to borrow those dollars. But this tool allows us to do those things. And I got to make sure Drawdown understands how the cash flow is going to work, so when the bills come in, it gets paid.
Generally speaking, most of these projects, we cash flow the engineering to start the engineering, and then the construction is the biggest part of your project cost, which needs to be financed at some point.
Bryce, you going to keep going? We're still going, right, Bryce?
Yeah. I was going to pass out a handout that I had for you guys, which is just the summary of all the CIP projects on it. But yeah, so what I wanted to show you here again, though, was just as we're talking about the funding of these projects, right? If we're doing this by department or just by a specific fiscal year, what are you guys ready to go tomorrow for, right? We'd just be looking at that 23 number, and again, looking out across even just this at a 4-year number, we know that we have some projects that we need to start financing and spreading out across that. And absolutely, I agree with the true cost of money is inflation over time. That's a really great summary there. But this allows the city to prepare many FYs, many fiscal years in advance on some of these projects, and then potentially, if that's planned for, be able to then backfill where those funds freed up cash for the city to do more work. But I think you can definitely see from these numbers that the city is doing quite a bit. And then we also have just like a project list which can be exported, and that's what I'm going to show you with this handout. But these are all the projects that we're going to be doing over the next 4 years. They're duplicated over fiscal year, and this is just Propel, though. So, and again, oh, crap, I forgot. Whenever I do that on this screen, I can't get to my little button over there. Technical difficulties. Let me wait for it to refresh here. As the city manager pointed out, we have different funds for each of these things. So, as was mentioned, hey, we're not showing out of Propel that we're paying for these huge capital expenditures are actually coming from SRF. So, in the tool, these are split out by funds. So, Rusty's fund, which is as part of that set aside money every year that was voted in for Propel, that half cent that's coming out off the top, he's got his own fund here. So we're not showing that off of the next year's projected income from Propel. It's a specific fund just for water and wastewater, and that is separated out in this tool so that there's a clear distinction for the public and city officials to see, oh, this is specific for water and sewer project. We can't spend this money someplace else. It's not one big pot of money. This is actually just Propel Water and Sewer as voted in by the public in the Propel initiative.
These are all capital improvement.
All capital improvement projects, right.
So does that, I want to make sure that we're all, does that make sense? That these are all capital projects just funded through different sources of revenue? Because that's really important. I think we talk in the past about whatever project it is, and we kind of tie it to that source, and that's all the capital projects we have. Well, it's not really all the capital projects we have. To Propel, CIP has capital projects in it. The GO bonds or ad valorem property tax has projects in it. We have projects that we borrow and fund out of that half cent that's specifically set aside, right, for some capital projects, among other things. So how we spend that money is important, and I want to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music when it comes to that methodology or that thought process.
And I think it's also important to distinguish here that this is the city's capital improvement plan. We're doing a lot of work here, and Propel's doing a ton of it. But there's also other funding sources that the city is going out and reaching out that are funding projects to be a part of the overall capital improvement plan. And this is an export from this tool. So it's a draft. So as we get more information, as we get some more costs for the future, and we fill this out, we'll be using future funds, et cetera, on that. But this is just for fiscal years 23 through 26 on there from the fund sources that have been put into the tool as of today. But I think you'll see that we're doing quite a bit of work here in the city.
In here also are the ad valorem that we presented at a previous council meeting on the budget. So those are all your phase 1, phase 2, all the residential streets are in here also.
Can we just show the ad valorem for right now to show a distinction?
So there's ad valorem right there. This is ad valorem. This is the bond issuances. This is how much money came from the bonds over the years. And then here's the projects that have been allocated from those funds to go into projects.
So you can see how those track with the availability of funding, which I think is very important. You know, we try to keep that millage rate at a steady level, Mayor, as we've talked about with Bank of Oklahoma and our financial advisor. We try to keep that millage rate pretty standard. We want to show the public that what the money that we're receiving through this particular funding source, which is GO bonds for streets, that we're receiving those dollars and we're expending those dollars as they receive those. In this case, it's really of a pass-through through the city, right? Because we borrow the money that pays the note, so it's a pass-through. But it's important that the citizens see this is how much we expect to receive, these are the projects that we're going to do, and it's that way for every funding source.
Okay. The last thing, I think you guys already have in front of you some of these cut sheets or business case evaluation forms, or however you want to call them, but I'm going to borrow this from you.
Sure.
Mr. City Manager, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is, again, just a draft of a template from some of the projects you've seen today. I think
Let me jump in here
Okay,
real quick.
go ahead.
So we've shown you the portal, we've shown you the program, kind of a finished product. Let's jump back to how does it even start? Where do we start from, right? So it doesn't really matter. Council has an idea or staff has an idea, and we create a business case evaluation sheet. Mary likes to call them rip and runs. Mayor uses business case evaluation sheets. Same vernacular, but it's just different wording for it. So let's just say, Mayor, you come up with a project that you'd like to see us look at, or council comes up with a project, or staff. Well, we put it through this capital improvement project business case evaluation, which is where we start, where whoever has the idea talks about the project description, if they have any justification for it. There may not be all that stuff available, but we'll start with some information. What the unintended consequences are if it's not done, if there's any special considerations, and if there are any potential alternatives. And then there's the project prioritization process that it runs through, the project identification, where we identify what potential funding sources are, if it's flexible or not flexible in the spending, what the triggers are, if it's a safety-related something along the line, what may push that up, if it's a high safety issue. What's the secondary triggers in there, like is it a quality of life issue, and when we project to complete it. And then we have a cost estimate, which is important because as we do our capital budgets, they're estimates. They're engineering cost estimates. As we've seen, our engineering cost estimates from a year and a half ago or so are now double. Well, in normal times, it wouldn't be that dramatic of a change, but it will change the longer we do not do these projects, and the criticality of some of those may push those other projects above other projects. And I think council needs to know that. For example, a water and sewer project, which is a compliance initiated action item, for example, will probably push to the top of the list, even over some of the projects that we want to do for, say, quality of life. And that's important that the council has that information. So if a citizen asks the council, why did my project get pushed off? It was supposed to happen. You can say, because this was a safety issue. We'll use the bridge. If the bridge on 11th Street is in a critical failure item, or it's in breach of collapse, for example, we may have to push that up. That's a critical safety item. And then you would be able to explain to the constituents that that's why this project got moved to the top, because it's a safety issue or it's a compliance issue. And it gives us a room to talk about it. The great thing about this also is it's a fair and unbiased evaluation tool for projects to be put through the system. You remember when council was invited to go through the evaluation criteria? We had all those information or sensing sessions where we talked about those. Well, those are important on how these projects are graded, and we still got to work on that numerical process of how that's applied. But it's important that every project receive equal footing, at least from the very beginning, right? Now, safety may change it, a compliance order may change that and push that to the top of the list, but they all start off on equal footing, and one's not important than the other when they start off. In the end, they may end up in different ranking orders.
And also, I think it gives us the opportunity to look at some issues. A lot of the infrastructure issues really don't come into play, but let's say in the future when we start talking about lakes and parks and things like that, we can look at, well, do we want to do this, thus, and so at Lake Helen or at Lake Latonka? We can look at the business plan and say, because that's what I kind of look at it like, and say, is this actually going to be somewhat close to profitable? Is this going to actually save us any money? Is this going to, maybe put some money back into the park's coffers so that we can help pay for something else in the future? So that gives us that information right up front.
I asked Garver to pull out of the projects that we have put in here 3 business case evaluations, and you can see they track with what you've seen before. You have the Casserole water line replacement, which Rusty spoke about. You have the 11th Street South Wolf Creek bridges, which Joe talked about. And then you have the East Gore Boulevard I-44 Pedestrian Bridge. And these are just a couple of examples of business case evaluation sheets. And then those get pushed through the system, and Bryce, show us over there on the left-hand corner what that looks like when they come out of a score approval. I know it's not completely accurate yet, but let's show that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the ranking system. And as you can see, there's way more projects than we have dollars or funding for. And that's where we do the capital budget processes in the future, where we talk about, all right, these are what we recommend from staff perspective. Council has their input. They get ranked. They're already ranked in a way. That doesn't mean they have to stay that way. Council has the discretion to move those around, but you have some evaluation matrices to work with. And then we finalize the capital budget, and that's what will be for that particular fiscal year. Did I miss anything, Mary?
And I did want to go back. I wanted to also mention, this is all from, on the Propel side of things, there's designated line items that were voted in Propel that could be funded. And some of those weren't necessarily what we would consider capital improvement projects outright. But they are included in this budget on an annual basis. And so that is something also that city leadership and council can take into consideration when they're looking at these budgets, is we've taken from today forward and made those a part of the budget on what's remaining to be spent on those line items, like the youth programs, the beautification of the city, some of those items that are more maintenance related or not capital improvement projects. They're still in here. The money allocated in Propel, that's still allocated in here from now going forward.
And I'll give it an example. One of the line items in the Propel plan that was approved was maintenance of streets, for example. It was $10 million put in for maintenance of streets. We program, I asked Larry to give me a budget, a projected budget over, say, 10 years. And I know the Propel CIP goes out further than that, but tell me what you would spend in 10 years. And I think, Larry, it's about $1.1 million a year. So it'll be about 9 years. But nonetheless, that's what he says he needs. So that was a line item specifically for maintenance. So everything from painting and crack sealing and striping to minor repairs, that's being accomplished out of those dollars, and we're showing that here as well. So, Mayor, if for example, if we do STEM education, I know that's a line item out of out of the Propel CIP, we would show that here as well, whatever the dollars are that the council votes for. So we want to make sure that we capture all those dollars as well, and the public can see where those dollars are being spent. And what it also allows us to do afterwards is go back and say, this is what all the dollars were spent on, because we have it captured. Did I miss anything, anybody?
The only thing else that I might add is with respect to the scores and the projects, FY23 is set in stone. Those are the ones that'll get started. But as new projects become identified, and sometimes the criticality of those might change future priorities as well. And so that scoring system will help your staff and you all make those decisions for future projects. So we have 4 or 5 years lined out, but that could still change based upon, as I said, the criticality of various projects that happen that are not yet known. So it does allow some of that flexibility for how that money is spent and for other projects to come in that you just don't know about right now. So.
In future budget years, we will have many more capital planning sessions before we get to this point. It's just we didn't have this all ready at this point, and I think what Mary said is very important. Your fiscal year that you're moving into and the next fiscal year are pretty solid. The year 2 or the next year, if we're talking 23 right now, 24, may have a little bit of flexibility in it, and then it gets more flexible as it moves out in the years. But to change a priority once you voted on it, and you know, say if we vote on this 5-year budget, right, and we agree, you know, on what year 2 is, you really should have a very good reason to change year 2, because we're planning and we're moving forward with all those right-of-way acquisitions and things of that nature. So it is a planning tool to help us, and you can move around some, so it's not, you know, you can't. You just ought to be very wary of what you're doing, and this helps us do that. All right, anything else we need to show them on this?
Nothing else to show. I did want to point out again that this is also that increased accountability, as was mentioned, that, you know, by having all these projects in here to the public can see it, and it's also budgeting out those projects so that we're assuring that we're getting these things done as voted on by the public, and the public can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good, thank you. Joe, you want to come back up? No? Okay.
You let Brian stay there if you're good.
Well, now let's talk about bond issuances.
I know it gets dry a little bit when you start talking about things like this, but it's important, and it's a big part of a budget. So thank you for your patience as we work through this. So, Joe, you want to come on back up? Yeah. Can we jump back over to the budgetary presentation? Can we go back to that? Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's go to the next one then. Okay. Let's move to the next slide then. Okay. Where we go to capital outlay items, right?
Yeah, these are the items that are going to be paid out of.
Our reverb account.
No. This column is reverb.
Mhm.
These columns are just
Our
general
self-funded.
operations.
Okay, Jonah, we go to the next.
There's no more slides here. The information we're going to be talking about here is in the book.
Okay, so the next portion of the, which will be in your book, which is not on the slide up there, is capital outlay items by category and funding source. This is rolling stock equipment. So our next couple pages in there will be page 1 in your book if you look at it. We talk about replacing a lot of things in here, which are, you know, anything over $5,000 is capital outlay in this speak, not improvement, capital outlay. And there's 3 categorical areas those are funded from. General enterprise funds, rolling stock or general enterprise fund, rolling stock, which is the reverb fund, and then activities with self-funding.
Michael,
Ma'am.
can you show us what page you're on? Because our pages are...
It's going to be about after the slide that it shows this graph. You're going to go 2 page. It'll be the 3rd page back. Looks like this.
Okay.
Okay.
So much fun, right? If you see here on our capital outlines, capital outlay items by category and funding sources, as I said earlier, you have general and enterprise funds, which is a funding source, rolling stock, which is a funding source, and activities with self-funding. If you look down through here, you can see that what we're proposing to purchase for capital outlay, and I'll hit some highlights. For example, just so we know we're on the right columns. For example, the library is asking for, out of general and enterprise funds, $18,000 to replace their flooring. If you were to go down for another category item or column there, neighborhood services will replace 5 1/2-ton trucks out of rolling stock. That would be $155,800. And then if you flip over to the second page for the third column, where activities with self-funding, you'll see that sewer system construction would be getting things like trailer-mounted compressors, hydraulic hammers, some dump trucks, self-propelled winch, a tractor, and a 1-ton mobile workshop van. So that's just how those kind of flow out through those funding categories. One of the things I do want to point out is, as we went through the budget, okay, where's that at? I'm looking here at I thought this was like email. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my book here real quick. Okay. Right. So we're looking at spending $6,026,944 on reverb, and the reason that's important to know is every year we collect reverb money and we estimate the cost of purchasing items. Well, this last year, in last year's budget, we didn't purchase but very little capital items, if you recall. Is that correct, Kristen? Okay. So that money was rolled forward to this year. This year we're going to spend those previous funds plus what we expect to collect this year. So a little over $6 million for reverb as we work through that process.
And if you would look on the that's going to be where he's getting these numbers are 2 pages before the categorical.
Let's go over that. Let's jump back to that. Y'all have that cap?
Yes, the page right behind the chart.
Let's go back there. That's our capital outlay funds availability sources for equipment. We have funds out of our cellular phone system. Again, funds out of our reverb, which is $6 million. We do have ad valorem geo bond funds, or these are all capital funds actually. Ad valorem geo bonds, the ad valorem fund from 2012, which just has a little bit remaining in it. 2012, which has, again, we're trying to move those funds over or spend those funds down in those categorical areas. 2005 as well, and then capital improvement fund. This is not the capital improvement fund that you're thinking. This is like D&D, miscellaneous expenditures, funds that come into there. Where you get to the next capital fund, and I'll get back to equipment, I'm sorry I missed these 2 pages, is the capital Propel CIP, Mayor, for that one is $25 million. That's what we're budgeting for this next fiscal year. And if you look down there, there's some asterisks, but when we start talking about that $25.52 million, that's what we expect to bring in sales tax that year. Did I mess that up? I don't think I did.
No, it's the 25.5 is the, if you're looking at the actual sales tax we expect to bring in, it's going to be 26.
Yes, I'm sorry.
$185,000, $26,185,000, and then there's some money that comes directly off the top of those funds, such as the public safety sales tax, the emergency fund monies, and the half-cent water and sewer money. Those are dedicated hard numbers that come straight off the top, and that's anything after that is what we can do, capital improvement projects such as the ones Rusty and Joe have talked about.
Now, there's an asterisk next to that $3 million because what goes into that fund depends upon what it comes in available in sales tax and then what is first paid out, which are in priority, public safety sales tax, then the emergency fund, and what's remaining we estimate to be about $3 million. That's what we have to put in there. I'm sorry I missed those 2 pages. So if we move back to the capital items, if we don't have any questions on that, we move back to the capital outlay or capital purchase items. And this is just you've seen these before. These are what we're recommending replacing. And like I said prior, we'll be spending about $6 million on those.
And all these funds, all these dollars that we are talking about right here are part of the preliminary budgetary documents that you've been provided in the past, and it is part of the numbers that we are talking about when we have been discussing our revenues.
So I know it shows $3,128,000 on page 4, but what I've asked Kristen to do is to go back. Our general fund replacement rolling stock list is a spreadsheet that we use, and what we do is we go down that list until we reach what we have for available spending. I asked Kristen just to go push that all the way down to the $6 million mark, and that's where you'll get the $6,028,000. So when we looked at it initially, we had about $3 million and some change. Now we have, we went back and looked at it, that $6 million, and we're just going to push that list on down further to capture some of those items. Because we did talk about our ability to purchase rolling stock, the cost of equipment in past budget years, and we want to make sure that we purchase as much equipment as we can with that fund. That was what that fund is for. And we pushed that down to, what item on that list, Kristen, did we get down to? Okay. But I think the point to be known is what we had on that list, there'll be another $3 million on top of that that'll push down through this which item it'll be, item 134, yeah, about somewhere around, 134. So we'll purchase 134 items on that list. Thank you, Dwayne, for finding that. Yes. Which will get us all the way down to the van, 1-ton, 15-passenger van for recreation services. Because somebody pointed out to me the other day that one of our vans was looking a little sad. So we'll replace that van.
That is, okay, I'm sorry I didn't number these. I was rushed getting them out this morning.
Let me show you.
That's going to be after the, after these 3 pages, you're going to be looking at the reverb rolling stock purchases. Yes. I'm sorry, Councilwoman. We'll. Yeah, I understand. And if I had the pages numbered, it'd be a lot easier for you.
So, I apologize. This is it's been a lot to put into information, but if you look down through that list, you can see that we're replacing a lot of trucks. We'll just start from the sequence number 8 and kind of scan down through it. We're replacing a lot of pickup trucks, mowers, and you'll see that the activity on the left, there's various departments that are receiving those, everything from traffic control and patrol to wastewater to police CID to fire prevention. It's well balanced. It's a criteria that we use based upon the cost to replace, the condition of the equipment, and it's really kind of based off a military model. You know, once you reach that military minimum expenditure limit or maximum expenditure limit, you look at replacing it. As you move on through the list, and we can stop on any one of these if you want, we originally stopped at right there before item 62. That's where you say there's insufficient funds there. That's where we stopped at before. But we'll push that on down through item 134 now because of those additional funds. And you can see that gets us a lot of patrol cars, and it also gets us some trucks for fire and various other divisional activities through there. There is a manager's list, and the mayor, when I first got here, when the manager's list, we go back to page 1 of 16. Those were manager recommended additions, right, which started at number 8. And that's where we looked at some of our business units like code enforcement, for example. Code enforcement really doesn't have adequate vehicles to get out there and do what they need to be doing. So we looked at replacing some of those trucks through neighborhood services. We also looked at a couple of patrol vehicles for our police department and a couple of fire prevention vehicles for our fire department, as well as utility services for meters, and then some athletic parks and recs neighborhoods. So we, again, those ones that were focused on by the manager, which manager recommendations on top of the normal list, that gets us down to 134.
Michael,
Ma'am?
help me recall this. I like this. Didn't we ask a year or 2 years ago for people to look at our vehicles, for example, and how do they need to be replaced? Are the replacements parts for them or what? Is this what the evaluation?
Yes, this is
we
what
had
that
asked for?
this is a list we've always had.
Yeah.
And it's based upon those criteria that you mentioned. How much have we spent on that vehicle? How long has it been in service? Are there parts available for it anymore? That type of deal. What's the condition of it? That we have some vehicles out there that are in very poor condition as far as the aesthetics go, and really some of them in the mechanical abilities of them. We did at one time, speaking of that, work with the company. We worked with a very well-known company to determine if we could lease these vehicles and maximize our dollars. In reality, once the analysis was done, which Richard was very apt to point out, once we did that analysis, we can actually buy our vehicles and maintain them ourselves cheaper than we could lease them from somebody. So we did go through that analysis and look at that. So we have looked at how we maximize our dollars. And Richard, as he pointed out, Michael, we can buy these cheaper than we can buy them, then we can lease them through them. So I think that was an important point. Sir?
So I'm going through this list. I'm seeing several different departments requesting, all it says is like half-ton pickup.
Correct.
But if you go to page 3, at the very top, Medicine Park Water Treatment Plant, half-ton pickup, $28,493. And the very next one says 3 half-ton pickups, $101,355. Now, I've just got that Catholic school upbringing, but those numbers don't add up to me.
Which item are you on?
It would be item at the top of the page on page 3.
On the left side, go to item number.
Sequence number?
6508 and 6509 and 6511.
Can you give me the sequence number on the far left column?
6511.
There should be a 2-digit number, sequence number of 596061 down the list. Are you on, which page are you on?
I'm on page 3.
Page 3, okay. Let me see which page you're on. Okay, you're back to the...
Right.
Okay. He's gone back to the capital outlay by category and funding source page, not the reverb list.
But throughout that, the reverb list, there's different prices estimated for half-ton pickups. So I'm trying to figure out, are those specialized pickups? Do they have additional equipment on them that are costing the
What it could...
Some may be single cab, some may be crew cab, some may be four-wheel drive,
Okay.
Just depends on how the vehicle for that department is equipped.
Correct.
Okay.
And it could be the difference between a 4-wheel drive and a 2-wheel drive. For example, when we buy pickup trucks for neighborhood service, for example, they may need 4-wheel drive, they may not, and that could be the difference in the pricing for them. They do go slightly off-road in alleyways and other places back in creeks and streams, so we may buy them 4-wheel drive. I would suspect in this case, the difference between the two is probably an extended cab or an extended cab plus 4-wheel drive.
Okay, thanks.
Remember the last pickup truck we bought, 4-wheel drive, it was a state purchase, I won't say the name, but it was 4-wheel drive, extended cab, it was about $33,000. So that tells me that these, if you divide it out by 3, is about $33,000. It's probably a 4-wheel drive extended cab. This one's probably not. Maybe a single cab.
I'm looking at this list, and there's several rolling stocks that are from the 70s and the 80s, and we're just now replacing them. I think we're doing a good job of getting all the useful life out of our stuff before we get rid of it.
Yeah.
We use them, yeah.
Mr. Manager.
Richard just pointed out, in our conversations with this leasing company, it was pointed out that you would, if you leased a vehicle, you would pay the dollar amount, whatever that is per year, to lease those vehicles, and then at the end of a 3 or 4 year cycle, you would have a residual value that you would kind of sell them back to them at, replace the vehicles, and keep the process going. Well, we did the analysis, and if we keep our vehicles longer, which we do, the cost for our ownership, and they calculated in the cost per mile, turned out to be better for us to keep the vehicles and maintain them than it would be to lease purchase them and sell them back. Now, you do have newer vehicles by leasing it, but the cost for ownership or the cost per mile was cheaper for us to own them.
We would, we're going to be looking at that business case for each different type of vehicle. There may be some vehicles that the total cost of ownership is less if you sell it after 5 years. Or if you use it till it can't be gone anymore, which is what you've seen we've done in the past. But there may be a way that we can actually have better vehicles for our citizens and actually have a less total cost of ownership.
Michael, along those lines, and what Marianne had talked about, or not, I'm sorry, what Linda had asked about, have we ever explored the possibility of just totally refurbing like a police vehicle? New engine, new transmission, new front end, new paint job, as opposed to the cost of buying new?
Sir, I'm sorry. Larry's the expert on that, but we used to do that. We are the experts on that probably. Is that right, Larry? We're the experts on it? But what we used to do when we had the old Ford Crown Vics, there was a lot more parts available for those. You could buy the whole front end for those. You could buy an engine for those. You could do a lot more rehabbing for those. We do that on some of our vehicles. We do that other than police cars. We do that right now for some of the other vehicles. Is that correct? He's coming. He's coming.
We do those, what you would consider a complete rebuild of a vehicle, especially when we're talking about our heavy equipment. We get into transmission replacements, engine replacements. Those are common. But part of our point system is to calculate how much money we're putting into a certain vehicle. And when we reach a threshold that it breaks a point value, we've actually put more money into the car than we could buy a new one for.
Okay, and so my point again is, and maybe we're not doing that work ourselves, maybe we're contracting with a local dealer and say, look, we want to return this car over to you. When it comes back, we want it in like new condition, new transmission, new front end, new all that. Not necessarily us doing it, but having it. Just wondering if there's a cost analysis on that, and if it's
what Larry mentioned was, and I know the guy who wrote the program that we're using right now. He's a former military guy. And the military uses something called a maintenance expenditure limit, a MEL. And that maintenance expenditure limit is set at a certain threshold. And once you reach that threshold, it's usually cheaper or more cost effective to buy a replacement vehicle. So what we do, this system tracks and evaluates all the dollars that we've spent against a piece of equipment. And like Larry said, when we get to that, we cross that threshold where it's cheaper to buy a new piece of equipment, that's when it gets added. Well, it's always on this list. It moves up that list higher, and it gets to the point where it's slated for replacement. That way we don't spend any more money on a piece of equipment that's not worth the expenditures on it. So let's just say we got a $33,000 pickup truck, what it costs us to buy a brand new one. If we reach, and I don't know what the number is, let's just say half, 50% of that, and we've spent $15,000 maintaining that vehicle, it's probably time to get a new vehicle. That's a threshold, it's an item, it's an evaluation tool. It's very common, the military use that, but I don't know what our threshold limit is. It's probably based on a percentage of the cost of ownership against the cost of replacement, not just a hard, fast number, right?
Correct. It's just the more maintenance dollars you put into that vehicle, the more points it adds up. And once it reaches a threshold for priority replacement, it makes it to the top of the list.
Right. And there's a lot that goes into that. It may be a fairly new piece of equipment. I mean, not old. It may not have a lot of mileage on it. It may not have a lot of wear and tear. But let's just say we lose an engine in a truck, a half-ton pickup truck, and it's $3,000 to $5,000 to replace it. We may want to do that because the vehicle, other than the engine, is still in pretty good condition. But if you look at the overall condition of the vehicle and it's wore out, it needs to be replaced completely, we probably would not do that. So our staff looks at it, Larry looks at it, evaluates it, and we have this system to help us evaluate when we replace those. And this is how we do it with this system right here.
I'm apparently not, and I know you're frustrated with me.
Nope.
But maybe we can discuss it later because I'm not getting my point through to you. So
no,
if we could take some time later, I would like to visit.
No, that's
with
fine.
you
I mean,
and
if you want to ask
Larry
your
too.
question again, I'll try to rephrase my response.
I don't want to create any more frustration.
Well, I can just tell you from my point of view, dealing with it every day, and I don't have the exact numbers and stuff, but things have changed from the way they were 15 years ago, and now they have changed even more because of the shortage of parts and stuff. But used to in the old days, in the Crown Vic days, those things stayed basically the same for 10 years, 15 years. The models, and they use the same control arms, and they use the same, all the parts were basically interchangeable. And now that has changed just because of the way they're manufacturing vehicles. Now the dealers are starting to not carry things that are 10 years old. So now there's the time aspect of it too. And then you put into that the lack of availability of parts and things now. I don't know how it's affecting domestic products, but it's really starting to hit hard on really strange things like wheel bearings. You just can't even get them anymore. And I've talked to some people that buy from Europe, and some of those factories say they're not ever going to tool up for that again because they don't have a big enough need for it now because they have sent a lot of those vehicles to the salvage yard. So it's getting really weird.
Thank you, Randy.
So, depending on the cost of the equipment, it may make more sense to do it. If we put a $40,000 Allison transmission in a $300,000 garbage truck, that may make sense. But we may not want to spend that same amount of money on a $30,000 pickup truck that's 10 years old to put a new engine in it. So we do look at those things, Mr. Harrod. I hopefully try to get to an answer for you. We do look at the cost to maintain those and to rebuild those in-house or even send them out if it's necessary, because some of the equipment that we maintain on the larger scale requires not only engine or transmission work, it may require body work if you're talking for a garbage truck, for example. The garbage truck today's $315,000 to $330,000. That arm picks up 1,000 trash cans plus a day. There's a life expectancy of 5 to 7 years on those. If it hasn't been used up in that 5 to 7 year point, we may look at selling it, auctioning it off, trading it in as a trade-in value or whatever the case may be. And Larry's more update on that than I am now because I've been out of that game for a while. But we look at all of those things. We got to make sure they're maintained and safe. And this tool is just a tool to help us evaluate those trucks. How we go about that, of maintaining those or replacing those, it helps us also make those decisions because we don't want to put money into a piece of equipment that's not worth doing it for. Yeah, and that gets us, Mayor, through the capital budget and the capital outlay. We'll call capital improvement, capital outlay, the whole thing capital budget because it is capital items. But that gets us through the capital improvement and the capital outlay budgets. I hope this is a process that works for council. We will refine this. This is the first year we've done this with this group of staff and council. We'll refine that in the future years. I want to thank Joe Don and his staff. I want to thank my deputy city managers and their staffs for working through all of this. I want to thank engineering. It took a lot of people to get to this point to make this all work. It isn't all one person. And if we don't work together as a team, we don't have a product that we can evaluate projects against. We don't have the information we need to feed our citizens the questions they ask. Those things are teamwork. And again, without that teamwork, we're not able to answer those questions or provide y'all with the answers. Or even when I get asked the questions through my staff, we need to be able to provide them the answers. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them or have my staff answer them.
Any questions? Final comments? Motions for adjournment?
So moved.
Don't forget, there is lunch downstairs, or should be lunch downstairs.
Are you expecting us to stay convened through lunch?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
So we do have a motion, but I didn't hear a second. And a second. Please call the roll.
Fortenbaugh. Yes. Warren. Yes. Hankins. Yes. Harris. Chapman.
I was going to say lunch.
15%. Yep. So we're going.
Charles.
This thing.